what is the symbolism of the Office of the Governor-General? What's your role? What are your responsibilities? Just talk to us.
I am the representative of the head of state. King Charles III is effectively is the King of Australia under our Constitution, and the Australian Governor-General exercises all the powers of the Crown. Community is really what I spend a lot of my time doing, which is...
The Office of the Governor-General.
Yes.
In a sense, it's a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
You are the bridge between this chasm of understanding and misunderstanding, connecting great history as well as a present and a future. So demystify this for us. So what is the symbolism of the Office of the Governor-General? What's your role? What are your responsibilities? Just talk to us about this.
Well, thank you for starting there. And you described that beautifully, because if it's confusing or misunderstood by people in Sri Lanka, I can promise you that the same is the case in Australia. And so part of what I've been doing over the last year since I was appointed and sworn in is to demystify the role for Australians and to take away that air of mystery and misunderstanding, and to set out for all Australians and now for Sri Lankans exactly what it is that I do. And in Australia, that goes to understanding our civics and what underpins our great, strong democracy. And so my job is very simply described. I am the representative of the head of state. King Charles III is effectively is the King of Australia under our Constitution. The Queen prior to that was, of course, in that role. And the Australian Governor-General exercises all the powers of the Crown under our Constitution through into the role I play alongside the person who actually chose me, which is the Australian Prime Minister. So Australia's Governor-General is chosen by an Australian Prime Minister. There's not really a process for that. You can't apply for the job. I think any former Governor-General would say the same as me. You receive a call out of the blue from a serving Prime Minister where you are asked whether you would consider serving the country in this role. And that is what happened to me some months before I was announced. The Prime Minister Albanese, called me, asked me to meet him at his residence. And I thought it was to do with some other work I'd been doing on the Australian economy. And he asked me, completely out of the blue, would I be prepared to be considered to serve? Quite shocking to be asked that question, knowing that there is no process and that he had made that decision. He doesn't have to consult with anybody. He doesn't have to run that through a process. And in this case, he kept it very much to himself and a few trusted cabinet ministers. He gave me a very short period of time to consider that. And once I agreed, spoke to my husband and daughter, and we agreed as a family that we could do this, he then wrote to Buckingham Palace, to the King's office, to make the proposal of me as the forthcoming Governor-General. The King, of course, then makes the appointment. So I'm appointed by the King, and the King and the Queen before him have never not appointed the person chosen by an Australian Prime Minister. So the King agreed and made the appointment, and then shortly after that I was announced, and then some months later I was sworn in our Senate with the full Parliament by the Chief Justice of the High Court of Australia. So very, very important set of matters there as to my appointment and then my swearing in. And then what I do as I exercise those powers is circumscribed by 4 C's. And the first one is constitutional, the second is ceremonial, the third is community, and the fourth is Commander-in-Chief of the Australian Defence Force. And they are all circumscribed either by the Constitution or in action by the conventions of the operation of the Office of the Governor-General. So I can take you through very briefly those roles.
Please
because
do. Yeah.
We do this with students that come through Government House. Whenever I'm out talking, I do try to demystify this because, as you had in your country, a Governor-General in 1972, and for a short period, your Governor-General exercised very similar powers to me before you amended your constitution and made it an executive Governor-General and then President. I am not a part of the executive, and I don't exercise executive roles. I do work with the executive and the Prime Minister. So in my constitutional functions, I am the office and the person who gives the royal assent to all of our legislation. So the bills that are debated in our Houses of Parliament, when they are completed, they come to me to affix the Crown's approval. And so I sign all of the bills that become the law. I sit in something called the Federal Executive Council regularly, which is a function of the Federal Executive. Two senior ministers regularly sit with me and we work through the delegated work under legislation, often regulations, treaty-making powers, appointments, and I sit in council and I have an opportunity there to ask questions, to make sure that the proper processes have been followed and to sign off on appointments, treaties, regulations. That's an important part of the role, but I'm working alongside the ministers at that point. Then there are other constitutional functions. At the request of the Prime Minister, I work with others to dissolve the Parliament in preparation for the issuing of writs for the calling of an election. And I receive the writs on return and I swear in the Ministry and the Prime Minister after elections have been completed. So they're very much a combination of constitutional and ceremonial. Community is really what I spend a lot of my time doing, which is something that former Governors-General, one in particular, Sir Zelman Cowen, said was the Office of the Governor-General, which was to reflect the light and shade of the country back to Australians and to the government.
Right.
So I travel all over Australia and I meet people, go to places often where politicians are that don't go, or where people don't want to talk to politicians. They want to see someone who has no politics, no policies, and is really just there to listen on behalf of all Australians. So I travel across Australia into remote regional communities, outer suburbs, and I listen to the stories of Australians, and often they will share with me things they would like me to convey back to those that have agency to affect their lives. It's a very powerful part of the role. I meet children everywhere I go to schools. I talk to young people a lot about their vision for a strong democracy and remind them about their role as participants in our active democracy as citizens. I often explain to them that Australia has one of the great strong democracies, stable democracies. We have compulsory voting, independent electoral commission, independent judiciary, a system where people show up as citizens and where we can change parliaments peacefully and the work goes on, the governance of the country goes on. The final role is Commander-in-Chief of the Australian Defence Force. Now, that doesn't mean I command the Defence Force, in fact. Again, this is a power that I have under the Constitution, and it is largely ceremonial, although on the advice of the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister, I make the appointment of the Chief of Defence, and I can remove those roles on the advice and counsel of the Chief of Defence and the Prime Minister. But I work very closely with the Chief of Defence and the chiefs of the three services as a representative of Australians who care about our modern Defence Force. And I'm the person who most often will go to commemorations to thank and think about and reflect on those that gave their lives and sacrificed for us over in war, in peacetime operations all over the world. And so when I'm travelling to a place like Sri Lanka, it's been important for me to visit the cemeteries here, the Commonwealth War Graves sites, to pay my respects to Australians who died here during the First and Second World War, and to thank the Sri Lankans who tend to those cemeteries so beautifully and keep them in a way that Australians can come and visit to pay their respects. I do that a lot around the world. Most recently, I was in Turkey, in Gallipoli, where I attended the 110th anniversary of the Anzac Day landings to give the Anzac Day address on behalf of Australians. I spent a lot of time at defence establishments around Australia supporting the modern Defence Force. I guess, Siobhan, the last thing I'd say is when I was appointed and I asked the Prime Minister why he chose me, he said he thought it was time for a modern, visible and optimistic Governor-General. And so I'm in the business now of, and it's a big project, of asking myself and speaking to the nation about what does modernity mean for the Office of the Australian Governor-General. And in part, it's to do this and answer your question about demystifying, explaining the job, talking about the fact that whilst it has lots of ceremony, it has some very significant parts that give stability to our democracy. And I'm very proud to serve in the office. I served for 5 years, and then whoever is Prime Minister at that stage will then go through the same process and choose the next Governor-General of Australia. But it's an absolute honour to serve, and I particularly like the part of my role which travels the world, particularly to places that we share common bonds of friendship and values, to see and to take the stories back to a country that admires Sri Lanka so much.
Absolutely.